Oh, yes. Admit One, My Reality podcast, where we provide a safe, caring, and non critical form of mental wellness through discussing, in part, the realities of mental illness. People in general find it difficult discussing mental health concerns, primarily because most people equate their mind with who they are, their self-worth, societal acceptance, and or rejection. Admit One My Reality podcast proposes that each person holds a ticket for admission into one's own mental wellness. You see, your mind is like a projector in the theater of life. Your thoughts create the screenplay. Your actions reflect your reality. Your reality is the admission ticket to mental wellness. Like, subscribe, and join in the podcast. Admit One, My Reality. And always remember, whatever you go through, you can mentally grow through.
Welcome to another broadcast of Admit One, My Reality. I'm your host, Dave Jones, owner and CEO of Wellspring Family and Community Institute, a small institute of learning, education, support group, and geriatrics here in the north side of Houston, nestled in Greens Point. We're so thankful today for another episode where we can share in a non-threatening way, a very user-friendly way that we can reach the audience of the listening ear for those that may be dealing with similar issues, similar problems, struggles in life as it pertains to mental wellness and also mental illness. And today I'm so glad to have with us today on this particular podcast, Mr. Keith Davis. Mr. Davis is a 30-plus year Houstonian by way of Somerville, Texas. Mr. Davis, thank you so much for coming out and sharing with us. This is a gentleman who has worn many hats, but one of the hats that he has today is the hat of the ownership of one restaurant here in the Tomball area of Texas. The name is Cajun Street. Tell us a little bit about your restaurant, Mr. Davis, and this is a time for you to give some pointers and also some free advertising as to the good delicacies that you have there at Cajun Street.
Well, Cajun Street, you want some of the best Cajun food in the surrounding city of Houston. We also serve barbecue, and I will put my name on that barbecue as being some of the best barbecue in the city of Houston or surrounding areas of Houston. But we're just small, family-oriented restaurant. When you're there, we're gonna treat you like guests. I tell a lot of my people and my staff. My staff's not. They can't use the word customer in our restaurant because we only have guests that come in our restaurant because every single person that comes in our restaurant, we're gonna treat them like a guest in our home and not a customer. So you looking for some great Cajun food? I'm talking about homemade gumbo. We make our own breading for our fish and shrimp, etouffee, dirty rice, all of the above. You make a trip out to Tomball, and I guarantee you'll be back in a day or two.
And what address is that for those?
The address is 28155 Tomball Parkway, and that's Tomball, Texas.
28155.
Tomball, Texas.
Tomball Parkway. Well, listen, I have not been there, but I've heard so much about your restaurant over at Cajun Street, and I'm certainly going to make my way over there.
Can't wait.
What would you recommend, Brother Davis, when I get there?
I tell you to start off with a cup of gumbo.
Okay.
Get you a small order of the boudin egg rolls. Then go into some of that. If you like fried fish or grilled, but Get some of that seasoned catfish that we have.
Well, I've got a mental note,
Yeah,
and
put that on a bed of dirty rice, and let me know what you think after that.
listen. I'm going to take your recommendations
Oh yeah.
and get over there sooner than later. Sooner than
One
later.
other thing is if you want some fall off the bone ribs or melt in your mouth brisket, don't sleep on that barbecue.
Don't sleep on the
Nah,
barbecue.
don't sleep on it.
Well, it sounds like you've been twirling a spoon for a number of years, and you have landed on good ground,
Since I
being
was
a
10
restaurant
years
owner.
old,
10 years old.
I was cooking for my brother and sisters.
Is that
My
right?
mother had to work a second job. She'd leave a chicken in the refrigerator with a note on it saying, "Keith, cook this."
That's it.
That's how I had. That's
That's
how I
that's
learned.
it. That's it.
First chicken I cut up had about 5 pieces to it.
Is that
It's
right?
supposed to have 8, but I ain't know what I was doing. So
You got to start somewhere.
yeah,
You got to start
but my
somewhere.
brothers and sisters loved it.
Is that right?
Oh yeah,
And so that's been one of your claim to fames ever since.
it has. It is one of my claims to fame. It is not my true passion, but it is a claim to fame. It is something that I can do well.
And I can see by the smile on your face that you really enjoy it.
Oh yeah.
You really enjoy it. Again, Cajun Street. Make your way by there. The address again, Brother Davis, is
28155 Tomball Parkway, Tomball, Texas.
Tomball, Texas. Make your way out if you want some good gumbo. And he said, lest we forget that those ribs are falling off the bone, he said.
Oh yes,
Falling
sir.
off the
Yes,
bone.
sir.
I had the pleasure of meeting Brother Davis a couple of months ago, and he shared with me a situation in his life. And I tell you, Brother Davis, when you were telling me about what had transpired some years ago, then invited you out to the podcast, The Admit One My Reality, because I felt that, number one, we have to take the stigma out of mental illness and we have to promote mental wellness. And the best route, or one of the best ways to do that, is to talk about it. Talk about it.
Absolutely.
And because there's so many that are dealing with mental illness struggles, and we want them to know, our listening audience, that you're not alone. I think isolation is one of the worst things that a person can do
Oh my.
when they are dealing with trauma and dealing with stressors in life. If you will, allow me to revisit a date. There is a significant date in your life, August the 18th, 1992.
Yes, sir. It is.
Tell us why that date is significant and what transpired.
On August 18th, 1992, Somerville, Texas. Um, my mother, my little sister, my niece, my nephew, and 2 of my daughters were brutally murdered, gasoline poured on their bodies, and them set on fire on that day. That's the easiest way I can say what happened on August 18th.
Now, is my math correct? Would that be a total of 5 family members?
6,
Was it 6 family members?
3 generations of family members on that one night.
When we talk about trauma and we talk about experiences in life that can traumatize an individual, it can't get more traumatic than that.
I couldn't think of anything. I wouldn't be able to think of it.
Was there a corporate, was there a rhyme or reason? Was this a random act of senseless violence? Can you give us a background as to, as much as you can, as much as you're willing to share? Was this a known assailant, a known perpetrator?
Well known. The young man or the young devil that um, ended my mother, my niece, my nephew, my sister, and my children's life was Robert Carter, and I don't mind saying his name out loud. I don't. Um, he was my. I have another sister named Lisa, and he was her ex-boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
and he went to my mother's house. And I don't know how far you want me to go into the story right now, but
Listen, we have this our podcast dedicated for this for this main purpose is to take the trauma out of the traumatizing event as much as you can and as deep as you would like to go.
okay. Well, let me start like this. Um, the the year before 1991, my mother had my daughters um, in Somerville, and they were going to school there. She At the end of the school year, I went and picked them up and brought them back to Houston with me, and also brought all my niece, my nephew, and my little sister with me.
Can you give me the ages of, at that time in '92?
In '92, my little sister was 16. She was um, 7 days from her 17th birthday. My niece Denitra was 9. My daughter Brittany was 6. My other daughter Leanne was 5,
Mm.
and Jason was 4 years old. And then my mother was 45 years old, a lot younger than I am now when she was brutally murdered. But they so I'm gonna kind of make a long story short, so because I know our time is short, but I brought the other kids back home, and on Sunday night, my mother, my girls were gonna go ahead and stay with me and go to school in Houston. I had them enrolled and everything. And on Sunday night, the day before school was supposed to start, my mother calls me and says, "Keith, I need you to bring my babies home. They can't stay up there with you. It's too dangerous in Houston. I just cannot trust it." And I was like, "Mama, they're already in school." She was like, "I don't care what they in. Bring my babies home."
That home is Somerville.
Somerville. And so I took my girls home that night. I got them up. We went to school that next morning, and I came back to Houston because I had to pick up some stuff for my mother. And I go to bed, and I get a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's one of my aunts that calls and says, "Keith, your mother's house caught on fire, and nobody got out." And when she said it, I dropped the phone. But I didn't believe. I couldn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
I called another aunt and I said, "Is it true?" And she was like, "Keith, I don't know. Let's just get up there." We get to Somerville, and for the first part of the morning, we think that the fire killed everyone. Let me tell you this: coming into Somerville, I've driven this way a million times
Countless
because
times.
I'm from there. Never have I driven that way and seen flames and smoke in the sky. And when I saw that on the way to Somerville, I was hoping this wasn't a true story. It somebody messed up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I turned that corner under that bridge and I could see those flames and that smoke,
Reality set in.
it did. I knew that it was over, that everyone was gone. And there was a scene out at my mother's house. I'd say, man, 5,000 to 6,000 people outside with and the town only has 1,300, but it was probably 5,000 people out there with law enforcement, news reporters, um, just anybody you can think of, and all the news stations from CNN,
All the outlets.
Fox, yeah, everywhere. They were flying in from New York, California, everything, and they told us, the Texas Rangers got with our family and told us we needed to find a meeting place. And my uncle had a store out farther out in the country, and we went out there, and that's when they told us that nobody died in the fire, that everyone in the house was brutally murdered. And I can't even tell you. It was to drive up and to see body bags in your yard that you have played in your whole life and the kids playing, that was hard enough. But when they told us that everyone was brutally murdered, then it took a whole nother turn, because along with all that hurt, then fear came in. Because if they killed all those people, they're going to kill us too. Because we never did anything to anybody. So if they were going to, this was someone that wanted the whole Davis family dead, is what we were thinking. Myself, my brother, and my sister, who were left after this happened. And so they told us that it was foul play. And then they started questioning us about who hated your family this much. Why would someone do to the extent that
So heinous of a crime.
right? Yeah, exactly. And so we couldn't answer the questions, because me and my brother and sister, we didn't. What did we know? Man, I'm gonna tell you, the day was bad. Then this police officer comes up to my uncle's store and says, "Is Keith Davis here?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." He said, "Well, you're the next of kin. Somebody's got to identify the bodies." Can you believe that? Man, these people. My mother was stabbed 29 times, beaten with a hammer. Several of the stab wounds went through her brain and into her skull. Went through her skull cap and into her brain. Um, then she was set. Gasoline was poured on her and set on fire. My little sister was shot 5 times in the head, stabbed several times in the upper torso and neck area. My daughters were stabbed 14 and 15 times each. My little niece, Denitra, she was stabbed 15 times. Jason, my nephew, he's 4 years old. And this guy, Robert Carter, is his dad. I don't know if I said that earlier, but that's his dad. And when I saw the pictures of Jason, I could see stab wounds in his hands. That means he was trying to
Ward off.
the stab wounds from his own father. And he stabbed this little baby 16 times, poured gasoline on his body. You could have poured gasoline in the house and set the house on fire, but he didn't do that. He poured gasoline on the victims and set them on fire.
Brother Davis, as you shared this story, I can't I can't conjure up the words sordid, heinous. I don't think there are words in the collegiate dictionary to truly and accurately define what you have shared. I wanted to bring you in to talk about something that I deal with as the lead therapist here at Wellspring on a continual basis, something that plagues our society and has come to the forefront of the mental health focus and attention, and that is PTSD. PTSD.
Never goes away.
Clinically, PTSD is validated once someone experiences trauma and it exceeds beyond 30 days. Well, 30 days is the criterion for PTSD as a certifiable diagnosis. If you meet the criteria and the symptoms of prolonged fear, agitation, flashbacks, the nervous system being altered. But we're talking 1992. This is something that I believe has been has been served an injustice within the mental health profession, because there are those with PTSD that has been diagnosed, but then you have your undiagnosed. There was a song, I believe it was Chris Christopherson and Barbara Streisand. They were in a movie, and the theme song to the movie was "The Way We Were."
Mm-hmm.
And one of the lyrical stanzas in that song, Brother Davis, it says this: "What's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget." Now, that may sound like solace, as though we can be the ostrich and we can just put our head in the sand and pretend nothing happened, but that's not reality.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is 30 plus years later, and you're sharing a story as though it happened yesterday. Your body language, the look in your eyes, it's just as fresh as it is now to you as it was 30 plus years. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. I can look at you while we're talking right now, and I can see those images of my little girls, all their hair burnt out and the side of their faces burned. My mother, she was beaten with a hammer and stabbed all those times. If you, I say this all the time, it's not a good thing to say, but seen the pictures of Emmett Till from when my mother looked just as bad as him when I had to look at her. But if I didn't know that that was her from her neck, I wouldn't have known.
Unrecognizable.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known. Something else you said earlier is PTSD goes undiagnosed. But here, in my brother and my sister and myself situation, how are we going to get diagnosed? Nobody came to help us. There needs to be, in my, like what you're doing right now, this is not an outreach situation. It's more of a reach out situation
Yes.
because we're reaching
Yes.
out to people.
Yes. Yes.
There needs to be a lot more of that, because if I tell you, it's been brutal for 32 years, but for the first 5 years, it was almost impossible to make it day to day, because not only was I hurt, angry, but I thought I was dying. That depression had me
Mm-hmm.
in a state where I couldn't see well. I thought that internal organs were failing.
Physiological.
Yeah, yeah,
It
it
has a
was,
physiological
man,
impact,
it was
not just neurological, but it has a physiological.
yeah, it was, and it was tough, and then having to um, be there for my younger sister and brother, because at the time they were like in their early, like 23 and 19. We weren't ready to be away from our mother. I know we already had kids, but we were still babies, and for something like that to happen, and then have absolutely no one to turn to, man, I would not wish that on. I wouldn't even wish it on Robert Carter, and I still hate him to today.
The feelings are real. The situation is real. Many times a person wants to wake up and hope and pray it was just a dream. It was a nightmare. And
Doc, I have
many
been
times
riding down the street and lost focus and thought that it was a nightmare or a dream,
Mhm.
and that I could still go home.
And
This has been
that's a
in
common
broad
symptom.
daylight.
That's a
Yeah,
common symptom of
yeah.
PTSD.
Not only go to sleep and wake up, you can be riding down the freeway and just like lose it
The
and think,
flashbacks.
right, and think you can go home.
We have come a long way in the research with PTSD. But, Brother Davis, we still have a long way to go. And forums like Admit One, My Reality, proposes to do just that. Open the windows, pull back the blinds, and take a good in depth probe at where we are and where we need to be, and those that are yet impacted, affected by trauma. You know, back in the 60s in Vietnam, when we went to war, Ho Chi Minh and that whole dispute between North and South Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
communism and non communism, whether we agree and many don't agree while we were over there, many are still asking questions. What was our involvement?
True, true.
The historians have written different dispositions and angles on Vietnam. But one thing we do know is that PTSD usually informally was linked to warfare.
Mm.
Back in the 60s, when a person came home from war and they dealt with the flashbacks, they dealt with the neurological implications, they dealt with the uneasiness, the anxieties, severe depression, clinical depression. It was being labeled as shell shock.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that.
He shell shocked.
Right.
Something falls on the ground and he gets down and gets into a fetal position and they, oh, you know, Robert is shell shocked. He was in the war. He was in Vietnam. Well, later it's been clinically labeled as PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
post trauma, the trauma that continues after the event has happened. Now, again, clinically, 30 days of meeting a certain criterion or criteria to validate and certify one with PTSD, 30 days is the time frame. But we're talking about post 30 years. And you say it's just as vivid today as it was 32 years ago.
That is true, but I have to add something to mine. The murders happened 32 years ago, but we stayed in court until 2012. So we were in court for 20 years,
Reliving this.
over and over and over. And during that time, I just want to tell you about this life that I have, and I'm grateful for it and thankful. I have 3 beautiful daughters. I have 5 grandchildren. But 2 years after everyone in my mother's house was murdered, so there's 2 grandchildren left. I have another son, and my brother has a son. And we go to the hospital one day, and Jeremy, my brother's son, is diagnosed with leukemia,
That's your nephew.
and he dies of leukemia um, 15 days before his 10th birthday. And we're in the hospital, and they give him to us and we're in a rocking chair. This is my sister-in-law actually in the rocking chair, and we're watching beep beep, and all of a sudden it went beep,
Flatline.
and his eyes popped open, and he took his last breath. That wasn't a TV scene. That was my nephew. I haven't even gotten over this stuff yet, and I had to see this little boy die and then plan his funeral. A few years later, I get a call around 11:30 at night, and they say, "Keith, your son, his name's Sean Keith, has been in an accident." I said, "Okay, I'm on my way. Where is he? How is he?" "He's dead." I gotta go over here off of Fort, right down the street. I don't know which way we are, but 45 in 1960.
Mm-hmm.
I pull off the uh, to the feeder road, and my son is laying out in the highway. I run over there. The police are trying to hold me. I run out there, and I'm telling him to get up. Get up, you can't do this. His arm is just barely hanging on. I'm not supposed to see this stuff, man. You can't. And go through it. And I'm trying to wake him up, and I can feel him that his skin is real wet and cold. I know he's gone, and they have to pull me away from him. That's my only son. That happened in 2017. So we're in 20 what 4? That's been
24.
7 years. So the trauma that night in 1992 was the start of it, and was the worst part, and it is the thing that I think about. I miss my son, and I miss Jeremy,
Your nephew.
my nephew, but I don't wake up and that's the first thing I think about, or I go to sleep and the last thing. Those murders in 1992 are for 32 years. They are the first thing that I think about when I wake up, and the last thing I think about before I go to sleep. It is on my mind every day, all day. Just cannot. And I haven't slept. Here's another thing, all night in 32 years. Not all night. I wake up every single night.
The impact and the implications of PTSD. You are a living example that people can struggle with PTSD a lifetime.
I don't have the capability in my own sense to open a restaurant and keep going. But because of God, I can get up every day. I don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
You can give me every scripture in the Bible to try to explain how he does it, but none of them fit, because when I sit back and think, there's no way uh, I can get up and do stuff. And through my travels, I've seen people that have had one child murdered and crumble, kill themselves and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Uh, how do you me keep going through that?
One of the things that I share with my constituents, I share with my clients, and I share with my staff is that Wellspring Family and Community Institute, a institute of behavioral and mental health services, we are faith-based in our foundation. Though we're licensed by the state of Texas, though our clinicians and practitioners are certified and licensed, we are faith-based, similar to AA.
Hmm.
AA has a 12-step program that's been in existence now for years. And when someone is battling that addiction of alcoholism, the 12-step program will take you through all of the rungs in the ladder as it pertains to departing from your former social gathering of influences that will have you to break sobriety or to,
Right.
and
I
then it
get it. Yeah, I
gets
understand that.
into the physiological and the neurological aspects of how the body craves for something that it's used to um, indulge in. And it goes through all the steps, the support steps, the physiological steps, the neurological steps, your social environment, detaching from that. Then it gets to the 12th step, and all manuals are closed. There's no more chapters. There's no more empirically based research, no more neurological components to explore and dissect. And so they say, what's the 12th step? And it's simply you have to trust in a higher power
Hmm.
other than yourself.
Yeah, you have to.
That's the
Yeah,
12th step to AA. You
that's
have to
period.
trust in a higher power outside of yourself. They've done all the empirically based research. They have scripted all of the clinical interventions, but that 12th step is the most important step. I want to break down some things and have you comment and share with our listening audience your travels within certain areas of dysfunctional behavior or challenging behavior, thoughts, actions, and deeds. One is coping with guilt. Many people that deal or have been, unfortunately, under the auspices of PTSD, there's a sundry of things that can bring this about trauma,
That's the biggest one. That's one
coping
of the
with guilt.
biggest one. Yeah, for us, for
What
me.
was the guilt, Brother Davis, for you? Because you were not an accessory, you were not a corporate to any of the crimes, you were not connected to a causal of your nephew's death, your son's accident. Where did your guilt come from?
I should have been there. For my little girls thought that their daddy was Superman
Superman.
and I was their hero, and so this only happened recently, where I started to think about, out of all these years, 30 years have passed, and I knew about them being murdered and set on fire,
Mm-hmm.
but only recently have I did I think about how a knife feels when you cut yourself or when somebody's sticking it in. And I thought about, I had a 6 year old daughter, and she had to suffer through 15 stab wounds. Do you know how bad that hurt her? It wasn't like he was stabbing a doll or something. It was an alive human.
Not an inanimate object.
Right.
This is a human being.
A human being.
And those thoughts,
And I wasn't there to protect her. Yeah, I feel guilty. I haven't. Another thing, I'll tell you, it's probably sad, and I don't know if you're thinking, man, Keith, man up or whatever, but I haven't laughed out loud, like, with
a hearty
just
laugh.
without guilt or whatever, in 32 years. It's always something behind it.
Mm-hmm.
If I do it too much, I'm thinking, man, how can you do this and you weren't there for your mama?
How
You
can
weren't for
you
you.
how can you move on with joy? How can you move
Right.
on in life with contentment?
My nephew's birthday. This is ridiculous. I know it is. I'm saying it out loud, and I know it's ridiculous. My nephew's birthday is March 8th. So was mine. I haven't celebrated a birthday since this guy killed him.
You feel guilty.
Right. My children are like, Daddy, come on, we want to do something for your birthday. And I have went through the motions a couple times, but how can I know what Jason went through. I saw the stab wounds in his hands when his own dad, your dad, your protector, is stabbing you to death. And
He's the perpetrator.
I'm, yeah,
The one that
exactly,
should be the protector
is the
has
right.
turned to the perpetrator.
And so in 32 years, nah, I don't. I just wouldn't even feel good thinking about, oh, let's have a birthday party today. Jason can't have one, and then my sister, who was his mother, she's sad. She's sad all the time still. I will say that she has some good days, and she's lived a productive life as well. But my sister, you want to talk about guilt? She brought Robert Carter to our family, and it has nothing to do with her.
No.
It's not her fault at all. This guy was one of the best guys I ever knew in my life. Before he did this, he could have married one of my daughters. That's how good of a person he was. And my sister, but every day of her life is guilt ridden, because if she wouldn't have brought Robert Carter into our lives, we might still have our family member.
Traveling down another lane of guilt. self guilt, self blame. And that's one of the natural, most common attributes of those who suffer with PTSD. Had I not went off to serve my country, had I not left to go to the store when the house caught on fire,
It's real. That's
it's
real.
it's real. It's a reality,
Yeah.
and it's one of the realities that in my profession we have to help those like yourself with interventions to help. I don't want to say heal, but help come to a healthy resolve. I don't want to say forget because that's not a productive route to your resolve. Just pretend it didn't happen. Just
That ain't gonna happen.
erase it from your mind.
Not gonna do it.
Trauma
And
and those
forgive.
who have been traumatized are traumatized by the realities, the unfortunate realities of life. Now, what I would like to dive into is we've come a long way, and there's a lot of research and a lot of studies, but we have a long way to go because there's so many unanswered questions. The one question that's only one word that humans struggle with is the word why. The one word question. It's nothing complicated about that word, a
Yeah, you
three
can't
letter
help that one.
word,
Yeah.
WHY.
Right. Right.
But that simple word that connotates a question we can wrestle with our entire life. Why? Why?
That's true.
Why? We know that one of the things that we try to get people away from, and that is the isolation. How difficult has it been for you to re-engage in social societal norms?
But I'm gonna start. I'll say this first. So, you said that one word. Why? It's a big word, and why did this happen? And so, there can also be a situation where you're in a situation where the hurt, the the feelings that you're going through are more than just why. It is more. It turns into, okay, we're not gonna know why, but how can we live like this? How do you get up
Pick
the
up the
next day? Yeah,
pieces.
how do you go on? That becomes the biggest struggle, um, when you're going through PTSD, clinical depression, all of that stuff. That that how, because when you go to sleep tonight, you're gonna wake up tomorrow and it's gonna be the same. You can have. I've been on vacations all over the country. I've taken my girls everywhere, and everywhere I go, I can be in Miami, or I can be in Italy, or whatever. When I go to sleep, the last thing I think about is my mother and my children and my sister and niece and nephew. When I wake up, that reality's still there. I've been in the most wonderful park at Disney World. It don't change nothing. While I'm there, I can still feel
Mm-hmm.
the burden of what
Transpired.
exactly. And so
It's
you
real.
got to learn, especially if you don't have someone to help. You got a hard way to figure out how to live with what you're gonna do, because you keep waking up every day. And so
And one of the interventions that is so important, Brother Davis, is the integration of healthy coping skills. I say healthy coping skills because all, turning to self-medicating,
I tried it.
people say, "Hey, that's not a coping skill." It is, but it's not a healthy coping
Don't work
skill.
either.
2 packs of cigarettes a day. My nerves are so bad. They say, "Hey, that's not a coping skill." Yeah, it's a coping skill. It's just not a healthy coping skill.
Right.
And so, what we do with our clients with PTSD, number one, we meet them at the level that they are. Everybody's not on the same level. You
Oh,
can't say to one
absolutely
person,
not.
"Hey, it's been 3 years. You should be better by
Absolutely
now."
not. That's
It's
horrible.
been 6 years. You should be better by now.
That's terrible.
Every individual is different because every individual is unique in how they process
That's
their
absolutely the truth.
receptivity of the trauma.
That's absolutely the truth.
Yes.
My brother and my sister and I grew up in the same house, and we all processed this event totally different. Nothing the same, except for the sadness. But other than that, how we made it through life for 32 years since, it's been done totally different.
And that's one of the key things that when we do our clinical studies is to try to make sure that no one looks at this as a blanket one pill fits all, one intervention fits all. You have to carefully implement and devise a treatment plan totally aligned to the individual, his or her personality, his or her areas of frustration, or his or her limits. Everything when it comes to PTSD has to be looked at the individualized plan. So what works for one may not work for another. Now,
Dr. Jones, can I ask you a question?
yes, sir.
Everything you're saying is great, and I'm support it 100%. But how do I get to you? That is the thing, because if 32 years ago I could have came and sat and talked to someone or whatever, and I see it. I've done some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I have a foundation that we try to help people. It's slacked because after my son died, I stopped being active with it. And I'm getting it back started again. But I found so many people that are going through this,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the tools, the knowledge, the compassion, all of that to help them. But I can't find you.
And herein lies one of the problems that we have in this country. Mental health intervention providers, how accessible are they
Not very.
to those in need? Knowledge is power, knowledge is king. He that, Confucius says, he that knows not but wants to know, teach him. Teach him, teach her. I don't know what I don't know, but where can I find the source of knowledge to help me know to get to my resolve? Now, you said something that has opened up a can of worms as it pertains to mental health in the United States. We are woefully lacking not only in promoting and the accessibility of health care to the least, the last, the lost, but not just the least, the last, the lost in our lower social economic communities, but mental health has no boundaries.
Hmm.
It impacts, or mental illness, I should say, have no boundaries. It impacts the rich and the poor, the
Absolutely.
black and the white, the elite and the downtrodden. It doesn't have a prejudice. It does not
That's
have a
true.
prejudice. When you ask that, it made me go back in my own compassion as to what we're doing today. We have to do a better job at getting the knowledge out that there are entities where you can receive the help before it spirals or continues to spiral downward. Without intervention, without healthy interventions, the spiral is not upward. Unfortunately, the spiral is downward.
That's true.
And so it's forums like Admit One My Reality that we can have someone as yourself to come in and share with our listening audience. This is not pretend.
Oh,
This is not a Charles Dickens novel.
nope.
This is a reality to where I lost 6 members tragically.
Brutal.
Then I lost a nephew. And then, if that's not bad enough, I get a call that my son has been in a vehicular accident. And I'm literally holding him and feeling the life leave his body.
That's true.
You and I are of age, and I'm going to indict you as well as I'm going to indict the videographer, Mr. Miller. We are of age to where we have heard and probably recited the nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty. Now, Brother Davis, that nursery rhyme goes something like this: Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and Humpty Dumpty had a great fall.
Right.
And all the king's horses and all the king's
Men
men
couldn't.
couldn't put Humpty back together
Together.
again. But now watch, it didn't say they didn't try. They came. Did they have the right resources? Did they have the right expertise? They tried, but they couldn't. Was it a lack in knowledge? Was it a lack in research? Was it a lack in astute intervention? The second thing I get from that nursery rhyme is that no one came pointing the finger and blaming Humpty. What were you doing up there on the wall? Did you fall asleep again? Were you playing up there on the wall again? Look at you. This is what you get for playing on the wall. The king's horses and the king's men came to help at their own level
That's
of
the key.
capability.
That's the key.
Now, watch this. Let's go back to the 60s in Vietnam. The person sees, experiences, and lives out trauma and post-trauma. His return back home to what they call the civilian world. But that person's still traumatized. But now watch where the knowledge was back in the early 60s. He's shell-shocked.
Mm-hmm.
There was no such thing as the empirically based research of post-trauma and the effects of post-trauma. He's shell-shocked. That's as far as it went. He's shell-shocked. There was no in-depth exploration of the physiological changes, the neurological effects. It was just Bob is shell-shocked. We now have come to a place in the plateau in life where we can see and recognize trauma, post-trauma, and match it and couple it with effective and helpful interventions that will not erase the event, the traumatizing event, but help the individual move forward in life in a more healthy and productive way. You said earlier, how does one get to a Dr. Jones?
I gotta get there. That's all I'm thinking right now.
How does
It's
one get to a Dr. X or a Dr. Y or a psychologist B or C?
Can I say one thing real quick before you say that? You take an individual like my sister. She's lost 6 family members. She lost her home. When I brought my sister back to Houston that night, all she had was a tooth. She didn't have a toothbrush. I had to go to Walmart and buy her a toothbrush. She didn't have nothing left because he set the house on fire. So all her clothes were in there. She lost her children, her mother, her sister, her nieces, and every belonging she had. If someone walked up to her, and somebody said they did, this is why I'm telling you this, and I know this was a long time ago, and gave her a card and said, hey, Texas has a compensation program that can help family members out. I'm going to tell you from experience, you didn't hear any of that. If there's no follow up that day, somebody could have given you a gold brick and you may not even have recognized that you got it that day. You would have put that down and suffered.
Brother Davis, you're speaking truth to knowledge, because one of the things that I stress in this profession of mental health is the follow up.
Okay.
And not just the follow up, but the efficient and the expeditious follow up, because seconds turn to minutes, minutes turn to hours, hours turn to days, days go into months, months go into years. There
Yes,
has to
sir.
be a expeditious follow up with clients who are experiencing or have experienced similar, if not worse, things than what you have experienced, because without it, it's like one going to the hospital and saying, I'm going to do my own heart transplant.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds ludicrous. That sounds asinine.
Right.
I'm going to do my own. No, no. You need someone outside of yourself with the expertise to do your heart transplant. There's some things that we can't do in and of ourselves.
Right.
And getting over PTSD is one of those mental areas of concern that, left to yourself by yourself,
Oh, yeah. Nope.
not good.
Oh, no.
Not good.
Not at all.
Isolation and what I call self remedying, self discovery. There's a human innate quest to try to come up with an answer. I've got this terrible headache. Maybe if I just lay down. Well, that terrible headache could be an aneurysm. Lying down is not going to
Not at
stop.
all.
But within ourselves, we come up with grandma's remedy of self-medicating and a self-resolve. I hope that this forum today will help many that are in your seat, but they're not in your advantage, because you have an advantage throughout the 32 years, knowing that this cannot come to a healthy resolve in and of myself.
Oh, yeah. No way.
There are those that still struggling with PTSD, self-medicating, and trying their best to alleviate, if not reduce, some of the ills of thoughts, flashbacks, the neurological, the physiological. And it's like putting a band-aid on cancer.
Yep. Can I tell you about this old man that, in my mind, saved my life? I went to see a psychiatrist. Me and my brother and sister, we went to see a counselor, and back then, they just wanted us to tell the story, and then once we got ready to go, they write this prescription out. Okay, the prescription helps you, but just talking to them, with them not giving us any feedback or anything like that, it absolutely helped zero back then. So I go to a gas station in Houston, and I'm pumping gas, and this older white guy walks up to me. I see him coming tomorrow. Man, look, man, I'm thinking, man, I don't want to be bothered.
You thinking he's a solicitor?
Yeah, I just don't
your
want to
mad
talk to
egg.
nobody anyway. And he says, Keith, he just says, hey, young man, how you doing today? I said, I'm fine, but I'm good. He was like, well, I'm not. He said, today is the anniversary of the day that my wife and my son were killed in a car accident, and they died instantly, and my son's neck was broken, and so on. He started telling me, and I
Now,
said,
now
man,
you don't know him.
I ain't never seen. I stopped at a random gas station on 59 in West Belford. I didn't want this man to bother me. And he walks up to me out of nowhere, and he says, then he starts to tell me. Now I'm at the bottom, Dr. Jones. I can't sleep. I'm vibrating when I'm awake. It doesn't seem like the world is real and all of that.
Just
And
going through the motions of life.
yeah, and he starts telling me, man, after this happened, I started feeling like this. I couldn't see. I thought I was gonna die. Every time he diagnosed a problem that was on me, it was it was going away. And I never told him. The day this guy started telling me about what he went through with his depression and how he felt and how things were happening to him, he went through the same thing that I'm going through right now. But he was diagnosing me and didn't know it, and lift, because I thought I was gonna die. I thought I was sick, man.
The same symptoms.
Same symptoms, but now I know that it's not just me. This is
No, no.
something that happens to people.
That's correct.
And
That's
so
correct.
I got in my truck, and when I was driving down the West Belford, it's the best I felt in like 5 years. And so I made a U-turn, and I went back. I was gonna just go tell that man, thank you, and I'm sorry if I came across whatever, and I couldn't find him. I don't know where he is to this day, but that guy practically saved my life.
And those are one of those undeniables experiences. Think about this. You had to be not at the same gas station. He had to be not on the same path of travel by foot, but the timing had to be.
How?
Archaeologically, the time, if someone had a pulled into the pump before you, you would have missed it.
Yep.
Had he stopped, he would have missed you. There's so many components that had to come together at the right time. That's the providence of what I shared earlier when I stated to you, we are a licensed mental health agency, certified practitioners, licensed psychologists, but we rest our foundation on faith-based operation.
I hear you.
Do you know how many things had to come into play at the exact time?
It was
You follow where I'm going?
That dude was a guardian angel
Yes,
for me.
yes.
And I'm gonna tell you what I learned from him, and I was able to use his practice that he didn't know that he was doing to me on my sister, because we never talked about how we were feeling or what we were going through. So I started telling my sister how I was feeling at night and how I couldn't sleep and how I was felt like I was vibrating in the world, and she was like, "Me too." And see, one thing that I've learned, and I've done this through my travels too. A lot of stuff can help different people, but I do know, like you said earlier, if I had a bruise on my wrist, I mean on my arm, and I knew that putting the ice pack on that bruise helped it, then you got a bruise, and I tell you, hey man, all you got to do is
Ice
put an
it down.
ice pack on that. Now we shared a common bruise, and
And a
I
common
gave you
remedy
right. And
that works.
if you can get people that share a common bruise,
That's it.
use a common remedy,
That's it. That's it.
man, that is
That's it.
part of the battle
That's
right there. I'm telling you.
that's half the battle there.
Yes, it is.
There are stages to PTSD, empirically based stages, research stages. Kubler-Ross did a study years ago on the stages of death and dying.
Mhm.
And she said one of the stages, the first stage was denial. I just can't believe it. Pawpaw gone. Pawpaw's gone. I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. You
Yeah.
said that as you were driving into Somerville, the reality set in when you saw the smoke. But in your travels, there's this mindset of disbelief.
It didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
It couldn't have happened.
So now here come the connectors, the smoke, the flame. Reality sets in. It's real. There are stages to PTSD that are common, just like there are stages to death and dying, according to Kubler-Ross,
Hmm.
that are common. Now, some say that everyone doesn't go through those stages within the order that she lays out,
Right.
but you will hit one of those stages. I believe the same with PTSD. You may not go through the exact same stages in the sequence, but if you keep living, you're going to hit one of those
Oh, I
stages.
don't disagree with that at all.
You're
Yeah.
going to hit one of those stages.
Yeah.
And everyone doesn't travel the same stage at the same time.
Hmm.
Forums like Admit One My Reality is purposed to do exactly what has been birthed in this session, to get the knowledge out to the laity of society
Hmm.
that is undergoing similar experiences and similar struggles with post traumatic events that they seem unable to shake,
Man.
and to give them the knowledge and the wherewithal of where the help is.
Amen.
If I Someone said, if you give me a fish, I eat for a day.
Teach me to fish.
If you teach me to fish, I'm going to eat for a lifetime.
Right on.
If I know, I believe, Brother Davis, in life, dealing with just people, that if people knew better, they would do better.
I believe that.
The man that acquiesces to alcohol because he cannot seem to get over the hump of his wife passing away from cancer, that's not a healthy coping skill.
Mm-mm.
But I believe if he knew better, he would do better. It becomes an addictive coping skill, but you don't have to travel down that road of unhealthy coping skills within your life. If you can start off knowing where to go, what's accessible, and people like yourself who are able to share your pain and it's vulnerable, and be vulnerable enough to say, it's been 30 plus years, Dr. Jones, and I'm still rocking and reeling in certain areas of my life and be vulnerable enough to expose that. There is help within your regurgitation.
Let me tell you how spot on you were about what you said. Um, this lady called me once and said their son over in Missouri City had been shot 8 times in the back of his head. It was her stepson, but it was the husband's real son, and he couldn't get over it. And she said he's not going to work. He's drinking every day. Keith, can you just come by and talk to him and tell him what you went through and see if it'll help? First time I went over there, he was so drunk, it wouldn't have done any good
Just
for us to
inebriated
talk to him. He was killing himself. Uh,
physically.
yeah, I mean he didn't care either, and so we went back another time, caught him right after he had only had one drink, and I sat at the table with him, and we cried together. But all I did was just tell. I didn't try to put Bible scriptures on him or none of that stuff. You said earlier, meet people where they are.
Yes.
All I did was just tell him my story, and I got up and left. And his wife called me about a week later, and she said, "You don't know what you did for him." To this day, that happened in back in '09, '08.
Mm-hmm.
They still send me Christmas presents every year to say thank you. I didn't really save his life. All I did was just tell him a story. God saved his life, but
The intervention of your story was his resolve.
just like you said earlier, that
The intervention of your story was his resolve. He didn't know what he didn't know.
exactly.
He didn't know
He
what he
did.
didn't know.
He texted me one time and said, "Keith, I lost my only son. You lost your only son, your only daughters, your mama, your nephew, your sister." He said, "If you can get up and move around after that," he said, "I'm gonna make
I
it."
can make it.
And he did. To this day, I'm pretty sure you wait till December 24th, they'll send me
Like
some.
clockwork.
They do every year, all the time.
You have cemented something in him by
Now he
way of a
can't
coping
forget
skill
that
that
his
he'll never forget.
yeah.
He'll never forget. And it's helping him every day
I didn't.
to
I just
survive.
told him a story. That was it.
Your story,
Right.
the connectivity, the synergy of your story was a medicine
Like that man was for me, I guess.
at the gas station.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I want to share, Brother Davis, and I really thank you for being not only vulnerable, but being willing to share your story. Because your story is the precursor to policy changes within our mental health
Absolutely.
industry.
That's what I was working on before I stopped doing the foundation.
Yeah.
Yep. You're right.
It's
Absolutely right.
stories, it's the realities of your story and others
That is
that
right.
is the precursor to not only a healthy resolve for you, but policy changes in Washington.
That is absolutely the truth.
We have the University of Houston is doing research now as we speak, Dr. Damon Kelly and Dr. Carmack, on what they call desert areas in our lower socioeconomic communities. And those desert areas are just areas that are depleted of
Mm-hmm.
mental health resources, fresh fruits and vegetables, access to care,
Right.
access to health
Right.
care. They call them desert areas.
Makes sense.
We need to bring about the waters of mental wellness to those arid areas within our
Amen.
society.
Amen. You do.
Because if they don't have it and they don't know, where do you go except for a self diagnosis and a self remedy that 90% of the time is unhealthy?
Yep.
It's unhealthy.
It's gonna leave you in a place where you're gonna be stuck for a long time. That self diagnosis and self remedy, man, that don't work.
No, no,
No, it doesn't work.
no, no.
It's like you said, putting a band-aid on
On
whatever you
cancer.
say. Yeah, yeah, no, sir.
My hope and my push is to take the stigma out of mental illness, number one, so that we can have some healthy, non threatening forums like we have today to bring about
It's
the
needed, very
realities
needed.
of not only mental illness but mental wellness. But Keith Davis, we have to be strategically, unapologetically purposed in this pursuit.
Agree.
It has to be purposed. You shared with me earlier, Dr. Jones, I wasn't feeling the best. Matter of fact, over the last week, I had come down with a bout of bronchitis. I could hardly talk, and I'm still a little bit weak in my body, but I purposed myself to be here today.
That's true.
I purposed myself to be
It's
here.
important. It's that important to me.
We have to purpose ourselves to mental wellness. It won't come by way of osmosis. It won't come by way of happenstance. It has to be strategic and it has to be purposed. That there are professionals, there are entities, there are establishments like Wellspring, but are we doing a good enough job to letting the community know? Do you know how many times a person has walked into the Wellspring agency and said, I didn't know you were here.
I can't even imagine.
I
A
didn't know
whole
you were
lot of
here.
times. Yeah,
I didn't know I didn't know this existed in Greens Point.
yeah. No, I
So
believe that.
that's an indictment on me as a healthcare professional. I can't be the best kept secret
Mm-mm.
to a person's resolve.
I agree. Totally. I completely agree with that.
If people knew better, they would do better. If people had access, they would partake in the access.
Imagine common people sharing common things, tragedies or whatever. See, when in the beginning, I didn't want to go to a psychiatrist.
The stigma,
I'm not crazy.
the stigma.
So I don't want to go sit and talk to a psychiatrist or a counselor because I'm not crazy. But it got so bad, I had to go talk to someone, you know. And my sister and brother were doing so bad, we just had to go see if it worked. But again, like you said, that stigma, that's especially in our community, that if you work on your mental health and mental
You're
illness,
weak.
right? Yeah, you got to get past
You're
that, man.
weak.
It is,
Toughen it up. Suck it up.
and if you can meet a guy that's not weak, you know him, but he's been through something like what you've been through.
That's right.
A lot of that changes how people think about mental health and mental wellness.
Brother Davis, I know it seems like it's been just a few moments, and I would ask of you, if you're willing, would you come back to the Admit One, My Reality? Because I would like to bring in a guest psychologist and also bring in Dr. Damon Kelly, who is a researcher at the University of Houston, and then have a part two to this forum, this discussion, and deal with how do we bridge the gap from
Absolutely,
the
I'm here.
uneducated to the educated
Right.
to where we can find the resources, and who needs the resources. Would you be willing to come back?
100%. 100%. I'll come tomorrow.
Listen, I know how vulnerable it is, but oftentimes in this forum, when I have content like today that's not fictitious, but reality. When an actor does a great job, he's recognized in the Guild of the Academy Awards. He's recognized in the Guild of being nominated Best Actor. Today, you're nominated. You're my hero. You deserve the Academy today.
Man, I wish I
For
did.
those that are listening, this Academy of knowledge and resolve and the realities of not only mental illness, specifically that of PTSD, and 32 years later, you haven't given up the fight.
Never.
My friend, you deserve the Academy Award.
Whoa.
And I want to say to my listening audience that we will come back and do a part two, and we'll have some other practitioners with us. And we're going to talk about policy changes and the need to bridge the gap from the uneducated to the hurt, the suffering, to those who are in positions of power and those who are in the positions of knowledge that can help take the stigma out of mental health and bring the resolve to those that are in much need. And until we come back and meet again, I want to say to you all that keep mental wellness as close to your bedside as you should keep the Word of God. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Brother Davis, thank you again for coming out. We will have a part two, and we'll come back. And remember, whatever you go through, you can grow through. Thank you so much, and we'll see you the next time.